Certain cities and certain franchises have had some very bad luck throughout the years and are known for their fertility. In the NFL, it's no different. I mean, the Cleveland Browns, good as they were back in the day, were NFL's powerhouse in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. They've been known as being laughing stocks and making one bad decision after another and not getting far in the playoffs, not getting to any AFC title game since their first iteration in 1990. The Detroit Lions, as good as they were the past few years, they couldn't get to the Super Bowl, and a lot of people wanted them to be in the Super Bowl. They have a long drought too. They haven't won an NFL/Super Bowl title since 1957. Well, it's Cleveland's 1964. What about the Bills and their fertility, if you will, futility? The fact of the matter of that is that the Buffalo Bills went to four straight Super Bowls, didn't capture any of them, which was bad in itself. But what if I told you there was a team in the NFL that was more pathetic than these ones? Yes, this franchise did win a Super Bowl and have won a Super Bowl. Unlike Buffalo, unlike Cleveland, unlike Detroit, and even Minnesota. But this team actually went through 20 years of being embarrassingly bad. I talk about the first playoff team of the New Orleans Saints and how crazy of a season it was. So get ready. I said, are you ready? Are you ready for some Cutter What If NFL football? A weekend invasion! Yeah, it's Cutter talking to you live. We got the hits and the misses. So come join me for all the fun. All the rowdy fans come in. It's the weekend, y'all. Are you ready? Yeah, let's do this, baby. Yes. So let's talk about the whole situation with the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans was an expansion team that on All Saints Day, which is November the 1st, 1966, they were given their first kick of the can. They would be going to the NFL for the 1967 season. And people in New Orleans were happy as can be. The Saints returned a kickoff for a touchdown in that first game, but that was their main highlight. The Saints would roll right along and become the laughingstock. Sure, Tom Dempsey had that 63-yard field goal in 1970 with half a foot, but it's biased with the fact that the goalposts were on the front of the goal line instead of the back of the goal line. That's why he could have easily kicked that kick. Realistically, it would have been a 73-yard field goal if he had made it. Nevertheless, the Saints had Archie Manning, who, is the father of Eli and Peyton and Cooper to an extent. But the Saints just couldn't do anything. They were known as the Aints. They moved from Tulane Stadium into the brand new Superdome, which allegedly was on top of a cemetery. And, the Superdome looked cool and all that. But the Saints couldn't do anything to save their own butts, in fact. In 1980, they were known as the Aints, and they introduced the paper bag over the head idea of a fan to America through ABC's Monday Night Football. People thought they were never going to win a game, but then they shocked everyone by going to New York, beating the Jets at Shea Stadium in one of the coldest games of the season. And the Saints were good. They won at least one game. Oh yeah, and the 1980 Saints team also blew a big lead to Joe Montana and the 49ers, cementing Montana's legacy as a comeback guy. So the Saints would be marching on, but of course, bad management, bad seasons, lots of things were bad. So yeah, we'll talk about the 87 Saints later. But after that, the Saints would hang around, try to make a few playoff appearances. They actually did go through 6 straight non-losing seasons after the 87 season. And it looked like the Saints were going to get back on their feet. But unfortunately, though, they couldn't. And of course, in 1999, they pulled off a draft day trade for the Agents of Washington, trading basically their entire 99 draft and a few picks in 2000 for the one of Ricky Williams, so they can get Ricky Williams. That deal would not have gone down if Philadelphia had picked Ricky Williams instead of Donovan McNabb. But it worked out. McNabb was a great quarterback for the Eagles. I mean, who else but the Eagles have had a quarterback at that time? Nevertheless, Ricky Williams wore out his welcome with the Saints, and retreated to the CFL, mostly through drug test problems. Nevertheless, the Saints would march on, and in 2000 they made the playoffs, and they even decided to put a voodoo um, ceremony before pregame before the Saints game against the Rams. And did it work? It kind of did because the Rams had the chance to get the ball down the field for the winning touchdown, but then they muffed the punt return, and the Saints pounced on it, and the Saints won the game. It was actually their first playoff win ever. The Saints would use some kind of hoodoo in the 2000s. Well, of course, the Saints franchise nearly went kaput in New Orleans because of Hurricane Katrina in 2005. I don't care what Kanye said and all that. The federal government failed the city of New Orleans as a whole. The Saints would be forced to play home games at Giant Stadium, LSU's Stadium, and even at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, which was the whole thing with San Antonio and the Alamo Dome. And people thought that the Saints would be sold to San Antonio because, the state of Hurricane Katrina and the Superdome after New Orleans was bombed with water. The fact of the matter for the Saints was that, they rebuilt, and strange enough, the first season they were back at the Superdome after Hurricane Katrina, they had that emotional Monday Night Football game against the Atlanta Falcons, blocked punt, and Curtis DeLoach swooped up and got the ball. And got the Saints to 13-3 and the 2 seed in the NFC. Everyone thought that this was amazing. Of course, coupled with the fact that Drew Brees almost went to Miami for a free agency, but because of his shoulder, the Dolphins got scared, and New Orleans decided to sign him anyhow. Worked out. Reggie Bush, their first round, second overall pick. Hey, he was good. I knew that in college. So anyhow, the Saints did lose the NFC title game, but at least they got that far. 4 years later, in 2009-10, they were back in the NFC title game on home turf against the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings screwed themselves up. Brett Favre went all bravado and threw a massive interception near the end of the fourth quarter. The Minnesota radio announcers were freaking out with good reason. I mean, all Favre could have done was ran for 5-6 yards. He had the running room, and it would have given Longwell an easier field goal. But he went too bravado. Saints kicked the winning field goal, went to the Super Bowl, took care of Peyton and the Colts, and brought New Orleans some closure 5 years after Hurricane Katrina. The Saints have been like decent, hot and cold and all that for many years and all that. But here's hoping they do better. Anyhow, let's talk about the 1987 Saints. So the 1987 Saints was the team's 21st in the NFL. And it was Drake Shern because in 1987 the players walked off because of bad compensation and all that. And the NFL canceled week 3, but then brought back replacement players for 3 weeks. Practically, they didn't want a repeat of 1982, in which, they lost several weeks and lost revenue as CBS, NBC, and ABC had to find other things to do. ABC had baseball to distract people. NBC also had, CBS had old games, NFL games, and NBC decided to go north of the border to do Canadian football, which actually ended up being lots of blowouts, and they pulled out. Nevertheless, the Saints were big. They ended up being 12-3 with a 9-game winning streak to close the season, which was amazing. So they were the second best team in the NFL, but the best team in the NFL was in their own division and conference. That beat San Francisco. Minnesota needed Dallas to beat St. Louis on the final day of the season to qualify. If I'm not mistaken, that was probably the last game that the Cardinals ever played in St. Louis before moving to Arizona. The Saints' best seasons before 1987 was 79 and 83, going 8-8. Jim Mora was named Coach of the Year. Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. Playoffs? I hope we win a game. So regardless of that, yeah, they picked up some players in the draft when it was 12 rounds. Toy Cook was their main guy in the 8th round. Tom Benson was the owner. Jim Finks was the GM. Jim Mora was the head coach. course, they used the replacement players. John Forcade was the main quarterback for New Orleans. So Tim Riordan, Dwight Beverly was also there. Eric Martin was a replacement player. Mike Kofer was a replacement player. Tommy Barnhart was a replacement player. Kofer would go on to San Francisco. Now we'll ask the real 87 roster. Bobby Haber was the main quarterback with Forcade and Wilson battling for backup spots. Mel Gray Jr., who was a good kick returner, was at running back Dalton Hilliard and Reuben Mays, the pride of North Battleford, Saskatchewan. Their wide receivers, Eric Martin and Mike Jones. Tight end, John Tice, future head coach of the Vikings. Stan Brock was there, Bill Kuntz, Brad Edelman, Joe Hilgenberg, Steve Corte. I don't know if that's line D-line, Jumpy Gavers, and Frank Warren. Linebackers, the best was Ricky Jackson, Vaughn Johnson, Sam Mills, and Pat Swilling. Toy Cook, Gene Atkins, Brett Maxey, and Dave Waymer were your defensive backs. Martin Anderson, your kicker. Brian Hansen, your punter. So after a loss to Philadelphia, they had to have their game against Atlanta canceled. And then weeks 3, 4, 5, they went with replacement players. Beat the Rams, lost to the Cardinals, but beat the Bears. And a lot of fans were like not happy with the replacement players. Soon the NFL players would cross the picket line. A loss to San Francisco put the Saints at 3-3, and it looked like they were going to be doomed, not even to finish above 500. But then they pulled off 9 in a row. They beat the Falcons, Rams, Niners. That's a big one. Giants, Steelers, Bucks, Oilers, Bengals, and Packers, all in that order. To go 12-3 and to end up being second in the division behind those pesky Niners who were 13-2 and had a 6-game winning streak of their own. The Saints had 9 straight to end the season. In the wild card game, Minnesota came into town, needing Dallas to shock St. Louis so that they could get into the one-game wild card round. They beat the Saints 44-10. The Saints' first playoff game was a disaster. The Vikings dominated the game. Anthony Carter returned a punt for a touchdown, and Wade Wilson threw a Hail Mary to Hassan Jones on the last play of the first half. So anyhow, the Vikings crushed the Saints 44-10 in their first playoff game. And of course, back in those days, there were 5 teams in each conference that qualified. So the 3 division winners would qualify, and then the top 2 wildcard teams would face each other. The winner would face the 1 seed, and all that. So that's what would have happened. So that was huge. So anyway, let's talk about what would have happened. The Saints actually won that game. So anyway, the Saints would have played the Niners because the Saints would have been the 4th seed, the Niners the 1 seed. Even though that the other division winners were ahead of them, the Saints would have moved on to face the Niners because they were the wild card winner and played the Niners. I know there was the pesky rule that the 2 teams couldn't meet each other because they were from the same division. But because this is a what if, I'm going to change the rules a little bit and say that the Saints would play the Niners in a 1-game winner take all matchup, and the winner would face Washington for the NFC title because Washington was the team that went to the Super Bowl anyway. And 60 Fahrenheit weather. The Saints kicked off to the Niners on 4th and goal. I don't know why the Niners went for it at the 1-yard line. 4th and goal at the 1. I would have kicked 3 points, but unfortunately, Montana got sacked by Ricky Jackson. And then, weirdly enough, the Saints used that for 6 plays, 75 yards for Martin Anderson to kick a field goal. But the Niners got the ball back as Roger Craig put up a 13-yard touchdown run to make it 7-3. So it was over. Then the Saints would kick a field goal by Martin Anderson to make it 7-6. And then, with a few minutes left, there was a touchdown to Jones, helped by a face mask penalty by San Fran. 10 by 61 yards, the Saints were up 13-7. And then the Niners went deep and had a 46-yard field goal by Washington to make it 13-10. In the third quarter, New Orleans got the ball first, got nothing. Anderson kicked the field goal to make it 16-10, 48 yards. And then San Francisco We'll do a few things. New Orleans scores a touchdown. Dalton Hilliard made the play. And then, stupidly, well, this is not historically accurate because there were no 2 point plays till 1994. But the Saints went for a 2 point conversion. Ruben Mays got it to make it 24-10. The Niners had a chance. 4th and 11, Jim Wilkes sucks Montana. Dalton Hilliard actually loses the ball. The Niners got the ball back, but they failed to do anything. Reggie said and put up an interception and all that. On 4th and 13, they decided to go for a field goal just to stick it to the Niners, and they win 27-10. Roger Craig is named player of the game, despite the fact that the Saints did win 27-10. Saints were 6 for 17 on 3rd and 4th down combined. San Fran 4 for 18. Rushing yards 147-87 for New Orleans. Passing yards, Saints by Roger Craig 56 yards. I don't know why they need 100 yards combined. Well, anyway, Ruben Mays got 105 yards. The pride of Saskatchewan. Bobby Hebert 8 for 16, 152 with a touchdown. Montana 14 for 24, 161 and a pick. To sudden. Morden 31, 23, 48, and 40 with field goals. Rushing 46. And the Saints won. So the Saints would go home. And it was Washington because Washington, yeah, they did host the game, the NFC title game, but because of the fact that, you know, the Saints had their second best record. So I'm just making some wholesale changes here to the Redskins. The Saints at home, so of course we are in a dome. And the Saints marched on. Well, first quarter, Aruri for field goal. I don't think he was the real field goal. No, he couldn't be the field goal kicker. Oh, better Aruri. But anyway, the second quarter was huge. The Saints scored a touchdown. The first one goal at the 9 as Haber hits Martin in the end zone, 4.68 yards. Then Washington scores a touchdown as Kevin Bryant got a screen pass and scored a touchdown to make it 10-7. Anderson would kick a field goal to tie the game at 10. And then at the 2-minute warning, Dawsey got a touchdown in the end zone, making it 17-10. I'm warning you. Sanders touchdown pass. Well, Williams to Sanders for a touchdown, tying the game at 17. Saints went down the field. They're at their own 30 with 49 seconds left. They got to the Washington 25, and Anderson kicked the field goal to make it 2017 at the half. Third quarter saw nothing. Fourth quarter, Array for 44 yards, no good. And it looked like the Saints were going to have it, but they had to punt. Washington couldn't do anything. Dave Wimmer with the interception. New Orleans punted with a minute 42 left, and they had a key play on 4th and 1 at the 38. Aruri went for 55 yards and somehow put it through the uprights to tie the game and send it overtime. And in overtime, New Orleans got the ball, had to punt. Washington punted, then New Orleans. Mays swept left, but New Orleans got penalized for false starts, 2nd and 14. Haber to Jones for 11 yards, and then Ruben Mays 15 yards to the right. Hilliard 15-yard play out of bounds to the 36. Mays puts up a 29-yard run, and then Washington gets a face mask penalty, which put the ball at the 3, and then Dalton Hilliard punches through, and the Saints beat the Washington Redskins and move on to the final. Ruben Mays, the hero. My boy from Saskatchewan. Washington was 5 for 13 on third downs. New Orleans 6 for 15. Passing yards 184, 119 for Washington. Running 208, 201. So yeah, Calvin Bryant put up 94 yards running, but Ruben Mays put up 156. So Ruben Mays knew what he had to do. Run the ball. And he did. Williams was 17 for 29, 201, 2 touchdowns, interception. He was the starting quarterback in the playoffs, not Schrader. Bobby Hebert, 13 for 21, 47, 2 touchdowns. Obed made from 48 and 55, but he missed from 37 and 44, which was shocking because those two missed field goals were shorter than his two made field goals. So anyway, the Saints would host the Broncos in the Super Bowl. Because I know, let's see, it was Jack Murphy, right? Oh, yeah, Falco, whatever they call it now. I think it was like 75 Fahrenheit or something. Something like that. So the Broncos, why did they say they're 10-4? That's a mistake. That's a mistake because, like, yeah, that's a mistake because, like, 10-4, they would have had another game. Hmm. Regardless of that, we go to the Super Bowl, and the final score was Broncos 31, Saints 10. So the Saints would not have won the Super Bowl. The Broncos would have won the Super Bowl and given Elway his first title. And this would have. Gerald, Wilhite, the hero, and all that. Rushing yards were kind of the same. Passing 147.89. The Saints couldn't pass the ball. Ruby Mays got 92 yards running, so that's good. He got more yards running than his team. He got passing. Haber 10 for 29, 105. Well, 3 interceptions will kill you. Elway 10 for 16, 159, and an interception. Touchdown. Milton Mack got a pick for the Saints, but Mecklenburg, Hundley, and Lilly with the field goals. I mean, Morton missed from 26 yards. You don't see that every day. So the Saints would have been the Saints, and the Broncos would have won the Super Bowl, sparing Denver some grief and putting New Orleans into grief-stricken thing. Anyhow, I'm just I'm going to do